Generational blessings or curses happen because of covenants. And we're looking at the life of Solomon in 1 Kings. Let me give you a little bit of context. Solomon is David's son. Okay. So when David dies, his son Solomon becomes king. Before he dies, though, he has an important conversation with his son in 1 Kings 2, verse 2 through 4. Okay. 1 Kings 2, verse 2 through 4. I'm reading it in the NIV. This is David talking to Solomon. I'm about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees and commandments, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me, which is, if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you would never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. The NIV, when David is talking to Solomon, when he tells him walk in obedience to him and keep his decrees, which is God's decrees and commands, the NIV uses decrees, but the KJV uses statutes. And y'all know that I read out of the NIV, but I study out of the KJV. So statute is a rule, law. It is a rule, a law, or a law that pertains to a country. Statute is a rule, a law, or a law that pertains to a country. David also tells him to keep God's commandments. And I looked up commandments, which are laws, right? Keep his laws. And the concordance explains, listen to this, y'all. The concordance explains that any failure to keep the command, i.e. to obey the laws, signified a covenantal breach, a transgression, and apostasy. So when David is telling his son, hey, keep the commands, he's telling him, do not breach the covenant that God gave me. What is the covenant? Well, he told him what the covenant was. The covenant was, if your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their hearts and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne in Israel, right? So I looked up breach, right? Because it says it's signified as a covenantal breach. I looked up breach. A breach is an infraction or a violation of a law, an obligation, or a standard. God's commands to us, whether it be the written commands or the commands that he has set for our lives, are standards, right? They are standards. You may not want to uphold them, but when you make God the head of your life, he sets standards for you. Your standards may look a little bit slightly different than what my standards for my life may be, because our standards are not just unto holiness. Our standards are to get us to destiny. So we have to keep, yes, there are certain moral standards that we all should keep, but then there are those extra standards that God may put in our lives to ensure that we get to the desired end, right? I looked up obligation. Obligation means something such as a formal contract, a promise, or the demands or customs that obligates one to a course of action. So an obligation is something like a formal contract, according to the concordance, a formal contract, a promise, or something that obligates one to a course of action. So when we say like God has these promises over my life, that means that it's a formal contract. He does have these promises, but once you step out of line, once you breach the terms and conditions of that contract, he is obligated to take action. He is obligated to take action against you, because obligation means a contract or a promise that obligates one to a course of action. Once you breach it, he's in action now. I also looked up transgression. Transgression means a rebellion or revolt against a moral or national entity. Transgression means a rebellion or revolt against a moral or national entity. It also means to violate or to not keep the responsibility of a contract. I know we don't like to think that this man is in contract with us, that we're in contracts with him. I know we don't like to think that, but all of these words are not just translating to this for no reason. This is a relationship, and we're dealing with laws and legalities, and the spirit realm is full of legalities. That's how they operate. We the ones who like to bend the rules. They know the boundaries of the rules and the contracts. We may know them too, but we think, oh, we said we just gonna be under grace all day. Hyper grace. You still gonna get a consequence. You grace, and God's still gonna love you, but you gonna get a consequence. That's just how it goes. In his love, he will reprimand you. In his love for you, right? Because you have rebelled or revolted against a national entity, because that's what transgression translates to, a rebellion or revolt against a moral or national entity. You represent the kingdom of heaven. So once you transgress, you have revolted. You have rebelled, right? Because you didn't keep the responsibility of the contract. You didn't uphold your end. I also found it fascinating that transgression also means one nation sinning against another nation. Our nation sinning against the kingdom. One nation against another nation. Us against who we say we serve. I also looked up apostasy because I didn't know what that really meant. Apostasy means an act of refusing to continue to follow, obey, or backslide. Apostasy is an act of refusing to continue to follow, to obey, or to backslide. He also tells him to keep God's testimonies, which is his divine charges. And why should he keep all this stuff? Well, David tells him you need to do all this stuff to prosper. And I looked up that the phrase that thou may prosper, and it says, have insight, be prudent, teach, act wisely, and be successful. So thou may prosper, y'all. It's not just to have money. Thou may prosper encompasses insight. It means to be prudent. It means to teach. It means to act wisely. And it also means to be successful. So how does God view sin? He views it as a violation of a law or a formal contract, which obligates him to take action against you. It's so serious that he sees sin as rebellion. And the definition of rebellion means open, armed, and usually unsuccessful defiance. That means you're going to be unsuccessful. You can be rebellious, but you're going to be unsuccessful to his established government. He's going to let you have it, but at the end of the day, you're going to be unsuccessful. So we see that David is teaching his son how to continue to what? Receive the generational blessings. David is literally telling Solomon, giving him the blueprint. This is how I succeeded. I was upright before the Lord, except for that Uriah situation, and God punished me, and then we got back together. I was upright before the Lord. This is how you continue to receive the blessings that he started, right, in my life. So in order to continue to receive God's blessings, Solomon must keep God's statutes, his commandments, his judgments, and his testimonies. If Solomon keeps the blessings, it would ensure that he will prosper in everything he does and everywhere he goes. Okay? So not only will Solomon's decisions, y'all, I need y'all to understand this. Not only will Solomon's decisions ensure his success, but they will ensure the success of his children and his children's children. This is generational. Remember, I always say, like, when God is talking, he's talking to 3 generations. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 3 generations. So Solomon's obedience can either secure 3 generations, or it can cause the other 3 generations to have great difficulty. And we'll see how that plays out. All right, so now let's look at verse 4. We are in 1 Kings 2, verse 4. And this is the part where we're talking about the generational stuff. It says, and the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. So in verse 4, we see David is indirectly telling Solomon that God made him a promise, but Solomon has the legal right to change the course of the generation. Legally, Solomon has the legal right. Once his father dies and he becomes king, he has the legal right to change the course of the generation.